What's up, guys? Welcome to my channel. I'm Cassie Marie, and this is No Culty Vibes, where we talk about all things cults, high control groups, undue influence, pop culture, and trending topics. If that sounds like something you're into, please like this video and subscribe to see more content. In today's video, we're talking about the Netflix docuseries Dancing for the Devil, about the TikTok 7M dance cult. This is one of my first TikTok series that went viral on the app and started getting more of a community there. So I thought it would be fun to sit down and watch my old TikTok series and then give you guys updates of what we have learned since then. I made this series back in 2022 when this story first went viral. So there's lots more to talk about. So let's dive right in. Quick disclaimer before we get started, the audio might sound a little weird. I had to download these off of TikTok and cut out the beginnings where I'm like, this is part one, this is part two, because that was a thing on TikTok a couple of years ago, and then re-upload them. So if there's any weird audio things, that is why. Also, as with all cults and high control groups content, there are some sensitive topics, including SA and manipulation, coercion, things like that. So please take care while you're watching and feel free to turn this off if you need some time. If you've not seen Dancing for the Devil on Netflix, fear not, because I explain everything in the TikToks. I start with the Wilking family's live video and start with Miranda and Melanie's story, and then I go into more detail about some of the other dancers and Shekinah Church and Robert Shinn. Robert Shinn is the leader of this cult. It was really wild to be watching Dancing for the Devil on Netflix and hear my own voice and then see my face for a few seconds in episodes 1 and 2, because they did feature a couple of my TikToks in the documentary, but we learned way more than what was just in my series. So let's just go ahead and dive in and see what we can figure out.
Saying that when I said, please come home to Papa's funeral, you're going to regret it. And she said, I'll see. And I said, well, who do you have to ask? And she's like, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to make a mistake. I'm just learning. So
this is an alleged culty situation that is unfolding in real time. So I'm going to share what we know from the Wilking family, as well as what is being uncovered about this management company slash religious organization slash church. And we're going to kind of go on this journey and figure it out together. So I first heard about this through a podcaster that I follow, Be There in 5K Kennedy. She just posted it on her stories that she had followed them during quarantine, and she had seen Melanie Wilking's live video on her Instagram and was just curious to see how this was unfolding. And then I went over to Melanie's Instagram and watched the live video, and we're gonna go through a timeline of the Wilking family side of the story. So Melanie and Miranda were TikTok dancers that became really popular during quarantine. A lot of their fans had noticed that in like January, February of 2021, they were no longer seeing Miranda in a lot of the Wilking sisters videos. And in February, she started her own account altogether. And by March, they were completely separate and they were just Melanie and Miranda. Neither party has addressed it this whole time until this live video was posted on Melanie's Instagram. But the family says that this is when Miranda completely cut off all contact from them, all of their family members, including grandparents, cousins, and all of Miranda's old friends. Literally have not heard from her hardly at all for the last year. According to Melanie, she and Miranda started going to a church that was a like very secretive, invite only kind of exclusive church religious organization. I believe they were invited by Miranda's then boyfriend, now husband, B-Dash. I don't know how he was invited, if he was just invited by other dancers, but they all started going to this church.
So I do have more information on how B-Dash got involved with this group. I'm going to talk about it later in this series when we talk about B-Dash's friends and family, what they had to say. It's super funny watching these TikToks of myself from 2 years ago. My hair looks so good. I miss my green hair so much. I obviously, well, to me, obviously, it seems like I'm a little bit more nervous than I am now. I was less comfortable with the camera. Like I said, this is one of my first series to go viral, and I'm having the hardest time not listening to myself in 2x speed so that you guys can listen to it and speed it up and have it at the same speed as when I stop and talk. But yeah.
I want to note here that exclusivity is something that is used by culty organizations and organizations of undue influence. It's a way to make you feel special. They often like really love bomb you when you attend these situations and tell you like you're special for being invited. And Melanie said that there were multiple red flags that made her feel like she didn't want to be part of this organization. Something in particular that I know really checks the boxes for culty organizations is that they were starting to require more and more of their attendees' time and devotion to the church. One story in particular that Melanie told was that before she started attending the church, she had made plans to pick up a friend from the airport on a Sunday when a church service was. And when the time came to go pick her up and she had to miss a service, the church leaders told her that she couldn't miss a service and that like to cancel, reschedule her plans, that it was really important for her to be there every single time. But Melanie had already made these plans and wasn't going to cancel on picking up her friend. And so she didn't go. And then they cut her off and told her that she couldn't attend the next service or next few services. And this is a like classic control and manipulation tactic. Along with the exclusivity and love bombing, they make you feel like you did something wrong, and they apply a punishment if you go against the church's wishes or if you miss out on something that they asked you to be part of. It's kind of like a punishment. You're now not in the in crowd. You're now excluded from the group because you didn't listen to what they said. So Melanie was really put off by all of this control, but Miranda seemed to really like the church and really like going. She and B-Dash were getting more and more involved, and Melanie brought up her concern saying, hey, like this is weird. This is a really high control environment. And that's, I believe, what kind of started the rift in the family. That's what I can gather from what the family has said. So now Melanie and Miranda are fighting, not getting along. The family's trying to show her that this is probably an unhealthy environment, but Miranda likes it and wants to stay. It all kind of came to a head when their papa or grandpa died, and they were going to go to Michigan to attend his funeral, and Miranda said she couldn't go. Now, they say their papa was like a second father to them. Their family is very, very close, and this is very weird and concerning that she wouldn't attend this funeral. In part one, I included a clip of her mom talking about that. She said she was going to ask the organization if she could go. She didn't want to make a mistake because she was new, and she ended up not attending her papa's funeral.
So that was pretty much word for word what they said in the documentary. Those were the two stories they used to explain the situation.
So after not attending her papa's funeral in Michigan, I think that's when the rift just was too big. And when the family came home, I think they had a couple more fights, and Miranda officially moved out, took all her stuff from the house, left a car that she had paid for, and cut off and blocked the entire family. Now, what's a little unclear to me is how this church kind of coincided with this management company. But apparently the same people that run the church run 7M Films management company.
So they described this in the documentary. We got some additional information. Basically what happened was Shekinah Church was a small church, and they did these exclusive like meetings and dinners, and B-Dash and Tight Eyes and another dancer named Vic White, I'll go over all of the dancers in a second, started attending these like invite only services. And Robert Shinn, the prophet, pastor, leader of Shekinah Church, originally when he moved down to California, wanted to start production companies. And he also tried to make his daughter Chloe famous. It just never really worked out. But he always tried to use like church funds to start businesses. I talk about that later in this series. And when he realized he had all of this talent in front of him, he and his son, who was a videographer, he was like, oh, why don't I take care of some of this stuff for you? Why don't I handle some of your brand deals? I think B Dash, when he describes it in one of his statements, he says something like, I was struggling with a particular deal that was coming in, and it was a really important, big deal for me. And Shekinah Church helped me negotiate that deal and booked me that gig. So they were like, we'll video for you, we'll edit for you, we'll book these deals, and you can just focus on dancing and on art and on your spiritual journey and walk with God. Now, dancers in Hollywood, it's a really difficult industry to be in. They don't really have dancers unions like they have actors and writers unions, and booking gigs can be hard, making a living can be hard. So this would be really enticing for dancers, even ones with huge followings, to not have to worry so much about bringing in brand deals and booking gigs all of the time. So that was the origin of why Shekinah Church and 7M Films are the same entity with the same group of people.
And also manage all of these dancers that are in this group with Miranda and B Dash. And I'll see if I can find all of the dancers that are part of 7M Films, or at least most of them. I know it's Slavic and Aubrey and a couple other ones. I wasn't really familiar with this like TikTok dance crowd. But I know that you can see it in a lot of their bios that they are part of this management company.
All used to have 7M Films in their bios and an email that was like their names at 7mfilms.com or something. They have all since removed them. They actually removed them a couple of years ago when this story first made its rounds and started going viral, because they lost brand deals when people started talking about this. Let's really quickly go over the dancers that originally were part of this, and I'll let you know which ones have left and are speaking out and which ones have left and haven't said anything yet. So as far as I'm aware, the dancers that were a part of this were Vic White, it's Slavic, Miranda Derrick, her husband James Derrick, B Dash. I don't know if it's Caesar or Cesar Willis, but he goes by Tight Eyes in the industry. His wife is Kendra Willis. She goes by KO. Kylie Douglas, Aubrey Fisher, Concrete. I think it's Kalia or Kylia. Nick Reno, Alexandra Watkins, and Gordon Watkins. So still in is Vic, Miranda, B Dash, Tight Eyes, KO. Kylie and Aubrey have left and were in the docuseries and are speaking out. Concrete and his wife have left. They are in the docuseries. They are speaking out. Nick Reno is still in, and in fact, his family is a bit worried about him. His family was featured in the docuseries as well, and we haven't seen a whole lot from him on social media, especially since the docuseries came out. His socials were actually deleted for a while, and then they came back on. And then Alexandra Watkins and Gordon Watkins don't seem to be part of 7M anymore or Shekinah Church, but they have not spoken out. I don't really have any updates on them or know what happened to them. So those are all of the dancers and their TikToks.
So the church, the High Control Church, is also managing these dancers' talent and their business. At the same time that Miranda officially cut off all contact with her family and took all her stuff, she also left her management company that she was managed by with her sister Melanie. She emailed them and basically quit the management company without having any conversation with her managers or anybody. And she hasn't really had any conversations with her friends that she had before this either. It was a very abrupt cutting off and blocking everyone, which is very indicative of a culty religion and high control organization. One last thing that I found really interesting in Melanie's live before we move on to some of the other parts of this whole thing is that I think her dad said that B Dash at one point when he was spending a lot of time with their family told them that their family was really weird because they were so close, that it wasn't a normal family situation. And it was so weird that they were all so connected to each other and close. And that has happened to me before in my culty situations that I've been in. But that's another cult tactic, that you want to get in between people and their relationships, and you want to make it seem like that, like you're weird and you're not normal for being so close and so connected to the people around you. So it's easier to pull you away from that and help you leave it all behind. I'm going to share interesting things I found in Miranda's TikTok account and more about 7M management coming up in the next. So Melanie and her parents also stated on their live stream that Miranda has had a lot of life changes in the last year. A lot of like exciting things happen and success that they have not been around for and have not been invited to or invited to share in these things with her. So Miranda and B Dash got married, and she's been doing a lot of amazing collabs, and she went on Ellen, and none of the family was invited to the wedding. Like, not just her immediate family, no grandparents, no cousins, nothing. None of her friends from before she joined this organization, no one knew about it. So I wanted to go back through Miranda's socials and see like what the timeline was on this, because it looks like,
sorry for the audio here,
in January, and all connection was cut off.
it's going to come back in a second.
So I went to Miranda's TikTok and scrolled all the way to the bottom.
So, like I had said in this part, Miranda and B Dash got married after the rift in the family, after she cut everyone off. She didn't invite any of her family to the wedding. And in fact, B Dash and Miranda, Tight Eyes and Kendra, and Alexandra and Gordon Watkins were not married before they joined the group. And all three of those couples got married while they were part of the group. Family members have tried to search Miranda and B Dash's marriage license and couldn't find one. So for a while, people were speculating if they were even married or not. We are not sure still at this point. I think it's interesting they didn't really cover that in the docuseries, that like people were wondering if these weddings were like even real.
And her first post was in February 2021. Miranda and B Dash did make statements that I'll share in a later video, but she did say that in her statement, she said that she and Melanie had a disagreement over who owned their sister's account, and so she had to start all over. So her TikTok kind of tracks with what the family's saying and what the whole storyline is. She had to start off by collabing with other dancers within 7M. So at the beginning of her TikTok, you can clearly see who the other dancers are in this management company, in this organization. Her TikToks start out at kind of like a normal production level. And then you can see in, I believe, April, I don't have my notes with me. I'm kind of doing this on the fly today. But I believe in April, she chopped off all of her hair and dyed it, which if you're a girl, you know, like if you know, that is a sign of huge transformation. Maybe she felt like she was leaving her old life behind. I don't know, we could speculate forever about why.
They did talk about this in the docuseries too, and I feel very vindicated because people in my comment section of this TikTok especially were like, her cutting her hair doesn't mean anything. They talked about how Robert Shinn had this concept and belief system that everyone was required to follow, and they called it dying to yourself, and it was based on, in the Bible, like the verses that talk about dying to the flesh. And because Miranda was so close to her family, that was a big deal for her, that they wanted her to die to herself and her desires and the things she loves, her family, and replace that with God's desires, probably Robert Shinn's idea as the man of God, his idea for her life. But they talked about how like anything that you identified with that was part of you, you were encouraged to change and get rid of, and not be too attached to anything. And I wonder if, because her long dark hair was the same as her sister's and was something she had had her whole life, I wonder if that was part of her dying to self process. The dancers that were in didn't explicitly say, yes, Miranda cut her hair because she was required to, but they did use that to talk about the dying to self, which I found very interesting.
But that's like a huge thing for her to chop off her long hair that she had for a long time and dye it a lighter color. In April, May, June, you can see the production quality of her videos go way up, and they start collaborating with bigger dancers like Happy Kelly and Twitch and Allison, and just some bigger names that are not part of 7M in the dance community. In August of 2021, she and B Dash post their engagement in a TikTok dance video. And then by September, they post that they got married in Vegas and she changes her last name. Now, Miranda's family and people that are covering this actually can't find a marriage license or anything that would suggest that Miranda and B-Dash actually are legally married. But I want to show you something else I found on her TikTok that is a little concerning in context of what might be going on. Now, obviously, this was like a collab of some sort or a paid advertisement. They're doing the World of Dance, dance choreography that was already done. But this was just so weird to me, having her be a puppet with a puppet master when there are accusations of her being in such a high control environment.
You would think they would take it down.
So that's where the family is still at with all of this. Miranda is still disconnected. Her and B-Dash don't talk to any of their old friends or family, or at least Miranda. B-Dash has cut off a lot of people too. I'll get into that. They both shared statements, which I think it's only fair to share. So pause to read these. I'm going to go through them. You can also go to the Wilking sisters on Instagram and read them as well if you don't want to pause here.
Okay, so Miranda's says, "Hey everyone, first of all, I want to address that I have communicated to my parents in the past year multiple times. A year ago, I decided to move out of living with Melanie. Even after all of that, I was still willing to work with Melanie on our TikTok account and make things work on terms we both wanted. I wanted to start a new life with James, but I also wanted to continue working together with Melanie. Then I was kicked out of the 3.1 million follower TikTok account that I originally started and had Melanie join. I asked if I could have access to it so we could continue our TikTok account together, and she refused to grant me access. After constant back and forth over this topic, I finally let Melanie have full access over that account, so it forced me to start all over. To everyone who has reached out asking if I'm okay and involved in a religious cult, thank you so much for your concern, but I am not involved in a religious cult. And regarding the statement saying that none of us are speaking to our families, I can say that everyone in my management group speaks and communicates with their families. It is my unique situation where I'm not speaking to my family as often as I used to because they were not supportive in the decisions I made. There was a disagreement in my family where they didn't respect a decision that I made to move in with James and start our life together. Due to that disagreement, I haven't talked to my family as much as I used to, but I have communicated with them within the past year multiple times. I can speak for James and our friends who are in 7M that they do speak to their families. So what you guys have heard about 7M dancers not speaking to their families is a complete lie. It is just a unique situation with my family where I don't speak to them as often as before, because who would want to speak with people who completely disagree with you and who don't respect you? At the end of the day, James and I are grown adults who are excited to be married and live with one another. And when people are not on board with your decision, I guess they just believe what they believe, and we agree to disagree, and things take time to heal. When I left, they decided to call the cops on James, saying that my Black boyfriend James kidnapped and abused me. The police officers ended up going to where James lived. They tried calling James, but he was on set for a job and actually could not answer his phone. They then got a hold of me and wanted to meet me in person to make sure that I was not kidnapped or hurt in any way. I ended up meeting with the police officers, and they saw that I was fine and that we actually laughed about the situation because they said, wow, it seems that, and it's cut off a little bit. Let's see. Yeah. I don't know if that part continued, but the next part says, I didn't want to go to my papa's funeral because I was afraid that I would be held captive in Michigan. I didn't feel safe with my dad. I went back for my things at my old apartment by myself. It was my mom, dad, and I at the apartment. We talked and they tried to get me to stay and not go and live with James, and I already had made my decision. My decision was final. And then it got to a point where the conversation was just going in circles, so I wanted to get out of there. I got in my car and I was ready to back up and leave, and they actually physically held me back and harassed me. My dad opened the trunk of my car and grabbed my purse so that I wouldn't have my license to drive. I had to forcefully grab my purse back and try to shut the trunk of my car. Then I got back in the driver's seat and my dad took his car and blocked me in my own driveway. And my mom was holding my arms, speaking out to me and reading what a cult meant and said that I was part of one. I didn't want to speak about these things because honestly, it's embarrassing, but I am forced to talk about family issues publicly by my own family. And then I think this is B-Dash's statement. First of all, there's two sides to every story. This is the other side of the Wilkings family drama. It started with a white, beautiful woman moving in with a poor black man from Compton that the parents did not approve of. I get it. I was renting a room and had no car. I was a divorced man with a son. Dean Wilking called the cops on me saying they were afraid for Miranda's life and that Miranda was kidnapped by me. They accused me of domestic violence and kidnapping. Melanie then decided to lock Miranda out of the Wilking sisters' TikTok account, which had millions of followers, and refused to pay Miranda from the previous brand deals. We got married and joined a management company that helped me to become successful. In a matter of months, I started getting paid from endorsements that dancers like me never had before. I've been able to pay off my debts, buy a new car, and move into a nice home. Now the management company manages my bookings and helps with taxes and finances. This company is not a religious nonprofit organization, but a secular for-profit company run by people who have a faith in God. It is their job to manage, control our bookings or schedules, FYI. Talents pay agencies and management companies to control their bookings and finances. That is not cult activity. It's called doing business. Is it wrong for Christians to be engaged in a non-faith-based entertainment business? If 7M was run by unbeliever, then it is no longer a cult. I have been burned and ripped off by many secular management companies in the past. It was Miranda and my decision to restrict our communication with the Wilking family to give us some space. Now this personal situation has escalated to get out from a cult organization who is not allowing members to communicate with their families, by the way. How do they know who talks to who? Did they tap my phone line or something? Don't be too quick to believe everything you hear from one side. After our Super Bowl appearance, our phones were lighting up and we were busy talking to parents, sisters, brothers, cousins, aunts, and uncles, high school friends, and fans. So where did this we were not allowed to talk to our families come from, Wilkings? We have chosen not to air our side publicly for many reasons. Miranda called Melanie and offered to meet and talk Monday if she takes down all the social media smear campaign, and she refused. Look, to be honest, God forgive them.
So their story is that there are just a lot of issues between Miranda and her family, that other members of this management company do speak to their families, although a lot of their families and friends are coming out and speaking against this management company as well and say they don't really talk to them. And while I think from their statements, it does sound like maybe the Wilking family handled this poorly in the beginning in the context of a cult, but not everybody knows how to deal with a cult, and they're probably really scared and afraid of losing their daughter. It's not an excuse, but we also don't know how much of this is true or not true, but I think it's fair to share their statements. So
we do know from the docuseries that the Wilking family claims that a lot of the claims in Miranda and James's statements are false. They called the cops because they were concerned Miranda was in a high control group. They didn't necessarily call the cops on James. And Miranda was locked out of their Wilking sisters account because Robert Shinn was running everything and Melanie's information was in there, and they didn't want Robert Shinn to have access to it. But they were trying to work out Miranda staying and being part of the Wilking sisters TikTok.
Move on and talk about what we've found out about the people that run this organization and some of the other dancers and what their friends and family members are saying. I want to talk about Miranda a little bit more. I saw on Without a Crystal Ball's Instagram that she had gone live maybe yesterday for about 5 minutes, and I didn't see her go live on TikTok, but I watched Without a Crystal Ball has it on her Instagram, and she's just sounded so anxious and I don't know, just anxious and odd when she was live. She said she was there to address questions, but she really just said that she is safe and that she's doing okay, and that there are a lot of lies and mistruths being spread and manipulations of the truth. But she's doing great, and she just wanted to show that she's doing great. And she seemed really anxious. And I get really anxious when I go live. I did my first live on here the other day and it was a disaster because I get really anxious and I get really weird on my video. But it made me think about this whole situation and how difficult this must be for Miranda and for her family. Usually when I talk about cults, I don't talk about them in real time like this. And even when it is something that's unfolding like right before our eyes, it's usually because someone got out of the cult and they're speaking out about it. And this situation is very unique because the people in it are still in and they haven't left, and it's family members and friends that are the ones speaking out. So I believe the Wilking family. I believe that, where'd they go? I believe that, they're really hurt by this and that they're disconnected from their daughter and they're scared. And I believe Miranda. I believe that she believes that she's okay. And I believe that she believes that her family is being, crazy for airing out what she thinks is drama online. You can't force someone to deprogram from a cult. And if you do, it's extremely traumatic. So a lot of this stuff that we're talking about online that she may or may not be seeing is not going to help her leave. If anything, it's going to reinforce her beliefs that like the outside world is absolutely insane and dangerous, and that her and the people in this religion or this management company are above it all. This just feels like a really hard and sad situation. After seeing Miranda's live video from yesterday and then her 2 live videos that she did today, I'm starting to understand a little bit more why her family's so concerned. This was Miranda on her live video today. I got on a little bit after it started, and I just could not believe that she was just on live, like completely silent.
My jaw was on the floor when I saw these live videos. I literally was like, there's nothing that you could have done that would make people more concerned that you were in a cult than these weird live videos.
I think she said a little bit more when she first started the video, but throughout this whole live, she did her nails and she did her laundry and she kept looking up to check like the comments, and she wasn't reacting to them at all. And she just said hi. And like at one point she was like, oh yeah, I'm safe. But like, I don't know when the last time someone asked if she was safe. And she was like completely ignoring the chaos of comments that were happening.
Seek his will in all you do.
And that was just a tiny clip from her live video earlier this evening, but later in the day from this first one. And she was just sitting there reading from Proverbs. Again, looking up to check comments, ignoring the chaos, and just saying hi and like, oh yeah, I'm doing great. And that's it. I don't know if they're trolling. I don't know if they're trying to help the narrative here. I don't know what the point of this was, because I'm like more concerned than I was initially after that. It made me think of thought stopping techniques, which is something that cults do. They teach you to do if you're hearing criticism or other points of view, to stop it in a lot of different ways, but reading the Bible is one of them. So I really quickly want to go through other people that are speaking out, because this is not just the Wilking family talking about Miranda. Most of the dancers that are involved have friends or people in their lives that are talking about this and saying that they've also been cut off by these people and that they've changed drastically over the last year or two and have very similar stories. So first, on the Wilking sisters page, I saw that Samantha Long, who is a longtime friend of B-Dash and Miranda, also posted a live video about her experience with B-Dash over all of this. She basically said that she and B-Dash were roommates and really, really close friends. And all of a sudden, he moved out and like really distanced himself over the course of a year. They would make plans to hang out and he would no-show, or he would cancel last minute. And finally they had a couple phone calls where she had to actually call him because she wasn't hearing from him and didn't know what was going on. She said that when they would talk in these phone calls, he sounded very different to her. He was talking about conspiracy theories and like using language that he doesn't normally use and just saying really weird things. She also said that the statement he made does not sound like him, does not look like his writing. She's just noticed such a difference in him. And when she really pushed and started questioning him about it, he cut her off entirely.
So this is a good time to pause and talk about B-Dash and Tight Eyes and how they joined Shekinah Church and 7M, because it is a wild story and it was entirely left out of the docuseries. There are a couple of storylines here that I feel like were entirely left out, and I don't know if they're going to do a part 2 or what, but there is a great article done by The Cut, and it was done back in 2023, I think. The article is called Dancing in the Name of the Lord, and it details a little bit more how the Crump community is involved in this, how Tight Eyes and B-Dash got into Shekinah Church, and Concrete, who has since left, was also a part of the Crump community and I think got involved through this. But Tight Eyes came from the Crump community. He actually was one of kind of the original founders of the Crump community, which is an LA-based style of dance that started in the early 2000s. And Tight Eyes was barely like an adult at that point. He was in his late teens, and he ended up being a really influential figure in Crump, and he believed it to be a spiritual practice. And he also kind of developed his own dance crew that he called Street Kingdom, of Crumpers that would dance and express themselves spiritually. And if you were part of this Street Kingdom dance crew, you were also kind of expected to be Christian and to attend this church that Tight Eyes was part of called Hospitality Church. Hospitality Church was led by a preacher named David Gurley. David Gurley was a former college basketball player that had spent time in prison for sexual assault, and he kind of rehabilitated, gave his life over to Christ, and then decided to become a preacher because I guess that's what you do. That's actually the story of several preachers, especially preachers of like cult-like churches. They were in prison for something or other and had this big transformation, and that's why people follow them, because they gave their life over to Christ or whatever. Gurley sometimes described himself as a prophet as well, which is what Robert Shinn describes himself as, a man of God. And there were a lot of really concerning things about this church that Tight Eyes had all of these people attend. Tight Eyes says that members of Street Kingdom were not required to attend Hospitality Church, but that he just prayed, and like prayer was part of their dance, and they did have to practice, and that was normal for any dance crew at the time. A couple of former members of Hospitality Church and that were part of Street Kingdom have spoken out to The Cut and described some of the same cult-like experiences that they had that were similar to Shekinah and Robert Shinn. So Tight Eyes and B-Dash and Concrete were all in a cult before they were in this cult. They said that Hospitality Church would do this thing where they would do tithes and offerings, and the pastor's right-hand man would take the tithes and offerings and go back and count it. And if it wasn't enough, they would come back out, and the pastor, David Gurley, would say, God told me that somebody here is going to give us $20 more. Who thought about giving $20 but then didn't want to? Or God told me we need this much more money, or there's people here who are going to give this much more money. And then he would tell them that they were cursed if they didn't give that money over to tithes and offerings. Hospitality Church also had a similar practice of dying to the self that I talked about earlier when I was talking about Miranda cutting her hair, but they just called it dying, and they based it off the same Bible verse that was like dying to the flesh. And this particularly often meant cutting off friends or family that didn't support the belief system or believe the same way as Hospitality Church. One of the former dancers recalls being threatened that he should cut off his brother. The Hospitality Church also helped the dance crew book gigs, but they were really strict about not doing worldly gigs. So they would put on their own Crump shows and like wouldn't want them to do anything in the normal industry. Also in this cult, a lot of the members, including Tight Eyes and B-Dash, were encouraged to get married to people that they were casually dating at the time. Both of these men got married and had children in this cult and then divorced when they left. David Gurley in Hospitality kind of said that they should get married because their spouse could work a regular job and tie to the church and support them while they were trying to have these like dance careers that weren't really lucrative at the time. Eventually there was like this huge rift in hospitality church, and Tie-Dyes actually moved to Vegas for a time. And it started when they were finally allowed to take a worldly gig, and their dance crew performed in this MTV dance competition, but they were told that they were going to win by David Gurley, and they were told that they had to pray like during all of their breaks and fast and do all of this stuff because they were entering this worldly competition and they had to protect themselves from that, and also they had to do all of that to win. So they like followed all these rules and did all of these practices and all of this prayer, and then they didn't win the dance competition. So that was a big wake up call for a lot of the dancers, where they were like, okay, this is just too much. It has gotten too far. This guy is full of it. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. And a lot of people left. And I assume that's when B Dash and Tie-Dyes got divorced, etc. So basically, after all of this, B Dash and Tie-Dyes met Isaiah Shinn, who is Robert Shinn's son and the videographer for the dancers, for the TikTok dancers. They met him at another gig, and I guess like really hit it off, and they liked his video style or whatever, and he invited them to these exclusive invite only church services, and we know the rest of the story.
We also have Miranda, Derek's best friend, speak out. She was friends with her for over 7 years and has not spoken to her over the last year. She's been cut off and ghosted. This is affecting the dance community in a lot of ways, and the crump community, which I don't know anything about, so I can't speak to it, but apparently this has happened before within this community, and we have people speaking out about Concrete and Tie-Dyes and some of the other dancers that are also part of 7M. This was all on Without a Crystal Ball's Instagram. The Wilking sisters' Instagram page directed me here, and there was a lot of information to share. Aubrey and I believe this was Kylie. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. I'm getting tired. It's late for me. Their friends and coworkers are also speaking out and saying when they've seen Aubrey on projects recently, he does not talk to anyone on the project, on the dance project, except his management company. More of Aubrey's colleagues speaking out. And then Kendra's friends have spoken out as well. And there are more. You can look at Without a Crystal Ball on Instagram to find more. And we are finally getting in to the church and the company and what Without a Crystal Ball on Instagram and YouTube has uncovered about this organization. So 7M Films is owned and operated by the same people that own and run Shekinah Church. They are named 7M based off of a belief system in charismatic circles. Charismatic and the New Apostolic Reformation circles also believe this a lot as well. And it's called the 7 Mountain Mandate. It is a belief that there are 7 spheres of influence that Christians should infiltrate and have control of in our society in order to prepare for the second coming of Jesus, basically. And beyond that, they just think that the world will be a better place if Christians have like ownership and influence over these 7 areas of society. You can give it a quick Google. The 7 areas are education, religion, family, business, government, military, arts, entertainment, and media. So this explains why they target dancers. They believe that it's hard. It's a really harmful belief system. They believe that Christians are superior to other people, that they have the moral high ground, that their belief systems are like truly the one and only way and the best way, and that the world will be a better place and we will prepare for the second coming of Jesus when these types of new apostolic charismatic Christians are the people in charge of these spheres. So they don't necessarily want these spheres so that they can constantly espouse Christian values, although they want to do that. They just think that they naturally, by being Christ-like, are the best people to run these areas of society and influence other people to be Christ-like and ultimately Christian as well.
So I couldn't find a good history of Robert Shinn or Shekinah Church, or like proof of like churches he's attended, or how he came to this belief system, or if they're part of the new apostolic reformation or involved with any of those preachers. There's not a lot of history or a lot of information about Robert Shinn or Shekinah, other than the fact that he's from Canada. He started Shekinah in the mid 90s, and he used to be a doctor before he stopped updating his medical license and decided to be a pastor, a preacher full time.
That's my understanding of it. I was part of a new apostolic reformation charismatic prophetic church, and I'm still unpacking a lot of it. And we weren't big on the 7M, 7 Mountain Mandate, but that's my understanding of what that was. There's a lot in particular about this belief system that is culty and potentially dangerous and definitely harmful in a lot of ways. And we may get into that another time on this channel, but for now, just know this one is very high control with very specific belief systems. So 2 names are tagged in every one of these dancers' videos on TikTok and on Instagram, and that is Isaiah Shinn and Daniel Joseph. Isaiah Shinn is the son of Robert Shinn, who owns the church and 7M Films. He is shown here posing with his BMW on Without a Crystal Ball's Instagram. So, this makes us all call into question how much money these people are making, where it's going, if it's going to the church, if it's going to the church leaders, if it's going to people for their work, which would be great. Like, that's ideal, right? But Isaiah is connected to the church. He is the pastor's son, and he is the one that does the videography for all the dancers' videos.
So I had suspected when I originally made this series on TikTok that the money was probably being taken from the dancers and was going to the church and the leader's family, but we didn't have any accusations of that or proof of that. But in the docu-series on Netflix, they did go a little bit more in depth into the dancers, like what they were getting paid and what they were paying the church. So they would get their fees for whatever brand deals or gigs that they got. They would give a percentage of that to Isaiah for filming. They would give a percentage of that for editing, a percentage of that for management. And then they had a 10% tithe to the church, a 10% fee for Man of God, which is Robert Shinn himself. So they gave money directly to Robert Shinn. And then there was offerings that they were more or less required to do on top of that. And sometimes the dancers would give up to 90% of what they got paid to the church and Robert Shinn. Sometimes they would get to keep a little more, like 30 or 40%. But yeah, they were giving all of their money to the cult.
The other name that pops up, Daniel Joseph, is the manager and producer, I believe, of all of the dancers. Now, allegedly, Without a Crystal Ball is reporting, and the Wilking family is backing up, that they have gotten several sources tell them that Daniel accompanies all of the dancers to all of their projects. They say that a lot of the times the dancers don't directly talk to anyone on set, even like the other dancers that they're collaborating with. They'll talk to people through Daniel. Allegedly, they have to text him every day. They have to ask him everything about their lives. They have to run it by this guy. And to me, what's really concerning is that there have been sources who have confirmed that he is very controlling and protective of them when they collaborate with other people. And people have seen him like stop conversations and tell people what to say and tell people what to do, and like really kind of like drive these dancers around. It's a lot. It's a bit much for a management team. That is like textbook harmful and destructive cult, because you don't, the way they would word it is like they don't want you they don't want their members exposed to worldly views, worldly opinions, worldly thoughts. It's really important to control the information that the members have and the people that they have access to. It's classic information control.
I wish they had gone into this more in the docuseries. I don't know if maybe they did talk about it and it was cut. I don't know, maybe they're planning on doing a part 2 and they'll talk about this a little bit more. But since we have dancers that have left, I'm curious to know if they in fact were that controlled when going on gigs and talking to other people in the industry.
Probably going to be my last part for now until like more information comes out. But just to wrap it all up, there is more coming out. There has been a lot of sources and a lot of evidence stating how high control the situation is. And my heart just goes out to these dancers and their families and what all of them are going through. Like I've said in other parts, I think because this is such a small like church and small management company right now, there are not like survivors coming forward. They aren't people that have left the cult coming forward. This is people that are connected to members in the cult that are very concerned. And that is so different to me and such an interesting way to approach this. And obviously there is so much evidence that this is extremely high control and definitely harmful and destructive, but we can't really do anything until these dancers see it for themselves. And the more we push online and the more we say like you're in a cult and like just kind of attack them for what they're wrapped up in. Not that I think most of us are trying to attack them, but I think a lot of people are getting really worked up by this story and we're wanting Miranda and other members to see what's going on and see the truth. And us as strangers on the internet can't do that for them. We can't make them see that. If anything, we're going to make them double down and get more insular in their situation, which could potentially be even more dangerous. And while it's so important for us to get the word out and keep talking about it as more information comes available so that hopefully other dancers don't get pulled into this, we also have to wait until somebody feels that they are harmed enough that the pain of staying in this situation is worse than the pain of leaving it. And when you're making a lot of money and you feel like you're spiritually superior to other people, it's really hard to do that. It's hard to leave that situation. It's hard to see that you maybe are being harmed, and there may not be a lot of pain involved for these dancers right now, except for disconnecting from their family, which I'm sure is painful for a lot of them, but they just so deeply believe that it's needed and it's required for where they are and what they're doing. If you have any questions about this, like maybe the belief system or anything like that, let me know. I would love to have like more discussions on this channel. But for now, that's it on the Wilking Sisters and 7M.
So I think it's wild that not even 2 years later, we've had a lot of people leave and speak out. Actually, as far as I understand it from watching the docuseries, all of us talking about this online and all of the media attention and specifically articles that came out are part of what woke up the dancers that did leave. They, they saw Robert Shinn and everybody inside denying and denying and denying, but matching it up to their own experiences and seeing the same narrative over and over again was what caused them to be like, you know what, I think this is a harmful situation. I am going to leave. And then over time, they realized it was a cult and all of that stuff. So it's nuts that like it wasn't us telling them, hey, you're in a cult, but it is spreading awareness and getting media attention can help certain people leave. And that's always the goal.
I'm going to talk a little bit more about Robert Shinn, who is the pastor and the man that created Shekinah Church, which is the church that also runs 7M Films Company. Robert Shinn owns that company and is also a pastor of the church. I'm going to start with a disclaimer about Without a Crystal Ball, because pretty much all of the information in this video is going to be from her. Every time I reference Without a Crystal Ball, there are a lot of people in the comments that warn me about her. You all have been very nice. I super appreciate it. You feel free to comment again if you want to make people aware of certain situations. The only reason I'm referencing her is because she is like the only one covering this story right now, and I'm just commenting on things that are going on. I don't have time to go like research court records and things like that. That being said, all of this information is from court records, which are verifiable. So it's not something that she's just, making up, if that makes sense. So in 2009, a woman named Lydia Chung sued Robert Shinn for fraud. She claimed that he used mind control and coercion and manipulation to convince her to hand over all of her assets to him and the church to the tune of about $3.8 million. Lydia claims that Robert often convinced the congregation to give up nearly all of their money to the church and to work long hours to be able to make the church more money. Apparently, at some point, Robert Shinn's sister filed for bankruptcy, and so Lydia Chung eventually sued her as well. And in those court filings and proceedings, Lydia described how Robert had church members living in houses that were supplied or provided by the church, and they were separated by gender. She claimed that Robert would often say that this is your new family, that your old family is your old family, and this is your church family, your real family, your new family, to create those really strong bonds. In a 2011 deposition, Robert Shinn himself admitted to telling church members to not only donate to the church, but to donate to the church's pastor, him, and that if you didn't do so, that you would be cursed. He also admitted to using church funds to fund his own personal private businesses. He took out loans against the church and never paid them back. Lydia Chung ultimately lost the original case because it's super hard in our legal system to prove mind control. I think she did end up recovering some money from Robert's sister, though.
So yeah, they did talk about a lot of that on the docuseries. I don't know if they went into detail about Lydia Chung's case itself. I don't think they did. So I think some of that might be new information. A lot of it they covered in other ways in the docuseries, but that whole thing was wild. And I do hope that our legal system updates at some point so that people can prosecute against coercion and manipulation in that way.
So in case you haven't seen it, Miranda went live on Instagram and met with her parents in person in Michigan.
We are live. We're in Detroit, Michigan. This is my husband, James. This is my mom, Kelly, and my dad, Dean. Since they wanted to make our lives public, we're gonna go live. Do you guys have anything to say to the live stream?
I love you, Miranda, and I miss you.
Yeah, love you. We're excited to see you in person. Okay. More details to come. But yeah, we're gonna have a family meeting. Bye.
Take a screenshot to read Miranda's statement.
Let me get out of the way. Yeah, so they showed that exact part on the docuseries, which I thought was wild.
And screenshot to read Kelly Wilking, Miranda's mom's statement. Couple of things I noticed right off the bat. First, that Miranda's husband, James, was there. She was not meeting with her parents alone. She was meeting them with her husband, aka a chaperone, in my opinion. Her parents seemed really surprised that she went live and that she was so angry. I don't know what to make of that, but it was just really weird. And
they did say on the docuseries that they were shocked to round the corner and have a camera in their face on a live stream. They were not expecting that. They were not expecting hostility. They genuinely thought that Miranda and James were there to talk to them about everything that had happened. And I think they were hoping that they were done with 7M and Shekinah.
Sad that they have to do this so publicly. Both of them, Miranda and her parents. Also, I noticed that in Kelly's statement, she said that James called them to arrange a meeting and they were thrilled to be able to talk to both of them and meet with both of them. But Miranda never reached out. She personally never called them. From a cult perspective, that is a major red flag because how do I explain this? Whether it's her decision or someone making that decision for her, she is not talking to her parents by herself. That is so she can stay in the mindset that she is in now and not change her mind about anything. So what do we think the reason would be that she doesn't want to change her mind on the current position she holds within all of this right now? If you have truth and evidence and real concerns to address, why would it benefit you to protect yourself from changing your mind when presented with new evidence? I'll put it that way. In Miranda's statement, she also is starting to come after Katie Joy from Without a Crystal Ball, claiming that Katie is doing this for her own personal gain, which honestly may or may not be true. I don't know. Lots of people have a lot of things to say about Without a Crystal Ball. But whether it's for Katie Joy's own benefit or not, the facts are the facts. So this is Stephen Hassan's bite model of mind control. This is a really good thing to look at if you think something is a cult. Maybe if you think you're in a cult or a family member is in a cult. From what Melanie has said about her experience with this church and group, we have already seen emotional control, making you feel elitist and special, and love bombing. It sounds like this is what happened when you are given an invite to an invite-only church. And she said it was really fun at first and they really enjoyed it. And they were likely love bombed and put in an environment where they were told you're special. According to Melanie, they used behavior control. They modified her behavior with rewards and punishment. They punished her for not listening to the group and for leaving. By Miranda not talking to her family directly, but doing so with her husband, James, or James initiating the contact, they are performing information control. They are restricting her access to non-group information. According to the Wilking family, Miranda had to ask permission to go to a funeral. That is, reporting thoughts, feelings, and activities to your superiors and leaders and not being able to make decisions yourself. We could keep going on forever, but hopefully that's enough to just show you that there are plenty of things that seem culty. Now, just because something hits a lot of those markers on the bite model doesn't always mean that it's bad. Stephen Hassan also talks about healthy versus destructive influence and how you can be heavily influenced and coerced, but if it points you back to you and is empowering and all that, it doesn't mean that it's unhealthy. It can also just fall somewhere on the spectrum of being mostly healthy or mostly unhealthy or somewhere in the middle. And that's what we don't know here, right? So we know from Robert Shinn's past that he very well could be extorting money from these dancers. He could be managing them and forcing them to give all of the money to the church. That would be horribly destructive and unhealthy, but we don't know. Unfortunately, someone has to leave and speak out, or we need more proof before we know how dangerous of a situation these dancers are in. In my personal opinion, from being into cults and all this stuff, it is highly likely that this runs on way more the destructive and unhealthy side of the spectrum. But that's just my humble opinion.
And they left, and we know it's definitely a cult.
A 7M Films Management Wilking
My hair
Sisters
looks
dance
amazing
cult
in this
update.
TikTok.
I'm going to cover up the faces of these kiddos because that just feels better on TikTok. But Without a Crystal Ball has been working really hard, doing the most with this story and covering a lot. And she has posted another family member of someone who is not Miranda Wilking, talking about Shekinah Church and Robert Shinn and the fact that this is a cult. So do you remember Daniel Joseph that we talked about in one of my series parts? He is the producer, I think, for a lot of the dancers, and he's kind of Robert Shinn's, I think he's the associate, let me check, hold on. Yes, he is the associate pastor of the church and producer for the dancers. I have actually spoken to Leah to confirm this, but she and Daniel grew up with Robert Shinn's kids. She is friends with Hannah. Her family left Shekinah Church, in the mid-90s, and then Daniel ended up rejoining. I'll talk about that in a minute. But Leah has a message for Daniel that she hopes will get around to him and that he'll see, and I'm going to read that from my computer. She says, "Daniel, you were my best friend, my protector, and my big brother. Life was always more bearable because you were there. When I dreamed of the future, I always imagined you being right there next to me. Life feels incomplete without you. Here. Every day I hope will be the day that I hear from you. Nothing you do or someone makes you do will ever change the fact that you are my brother, and nothing could make me and mom and dad and your family stop loving you. Love, Leah. Leah has not spoken to Daniel in 7 years. He cut her and her family off when she asked questions about Shekinah Church and about his marriage. Also has a message for Robert Shinn that I'm going to read. She says, your time of hiding in the dark is over. The light is taking over and you have nowhere to hide now. I've known you since I was 12 and I didn't realize then what I know now. I didn't realize what my spidey senses were telling me, but now I know and your time is up. Leah says that her and her family were some of the first members of Shekinah Church, but they left when they were asked to cut off contact with someone that they knew and respected and loved very much, which is textbook cult. And she said a family dispute over Daniel's future may be what led him to rejoin Shekinah Church under Robert. She says that her parents made mistakes and regret the choices that they made at the time, but they were always just trying to do what was in his best interest. They're blocked everywhere. It's been 7 years since any of them heard from him, and they miss him very much. I think we can officially say with all the new stuff coming out that this is definitely a cult. And I'm really hoping for the best outcome for all the church members and dancers and their families.
So they didn't really cover the Daniel Joseph and his family very much in the docuseries. They did say that Daniel and Chloe, he was married to Chloe Shinn, who was Robert's daughter, left, but Daniel and Chloe asked for privacy when they left, and I guess they don't want to speak out. I unfortunately don't have any updates from Leah. I haven't reached out to her. I doubt that she wants to speak out right now either, so I'm not sure if they ever reconnected or what's going on with that, but I definitely respect their privacy, and if they ever want to come forward, I'm sure they know who to reach out to, and we would hear from them if they wanted. Okay, so that was the end of the TikTok series. There are a couple other things that I wanted to talk about that was not in my original series, and Miranda has made a statement about the documentary coming out, so we're going to talk about that really quickly as well. One of the questions that was asked over and over on my TikToks is, do we know where the recordings of Robert Shinn came from that were featured in the docuseries? I loved that they had that as evidence in the docuseries. It explained a lot, and it was proof of a lot of what we all said before the dancers came out, and also supporting what the dancers who have left have said. I have no idea where those recordings came from. My guess would be from a member who either left with hard drives that had those recordings on them, or someone who was still in but was under the radar, maybe wanted to record some of the sermons before they got out. I'm not sure. Without a Crystal Ball was listed as a producer. Katie Paulson, I think her name is, I think was a producer on this docuseries. She was heavily involved in it, and she posted that the recordings were obtained legally and didn't give any information. So I'm guessing that's kind of hush hush, and we probably don't want Robert to know where those recordings came from. So I actually think like the biggest elephant in the room with all of this that nobody has talked about at all is Vic White. It's Slavic on TikTok and Instagram. He has almost 8 million followers on TikTok, and he seems to be one of the biggest stars of this group, this management company, and no one talks about him at all. Obviously, he is still in. None of his family seems to be concerned about him being in. I actually have a theory, and this is also tied to another question that I've seen on my TikToks over and over again, and that is people asking if Twitch was involved when this all started coming out. So I have no idea if Twitch and his wife, Allison, were ever involved in Shekinah Church or 7M. I don't think so personally. I could very much be wrong, but it is very clear that Vic White, Slavic, is very close to Twitch and Allison. Before Twitch was no longer with us, I saw a lot of videos of them together. I'm guessing that's how they got on the Ellen show, because the whole 7M group of dancers performed on Ellen. And I think the connection with Twitch is how they got there. My theory is that through So You Think You Can Dance, Vic became really close with Twitch and Allison, and that might be the industry connections that 7M has in general. Because people were wondering, like, when this all started, how they seemed to have all of these connections when Robert Shinn and Isaiah didn't necessarily have dancer connections in the industries to begin with. I'm wondering if Vic's friendship with Twitch and Allison is what gave them those connections. And I wonder if, because Vic has the most followers, likely brings in the most money, probably is the connection that brings in the brand deals and the gigs and all of that. I wonder if he's treated differently than some of the other members. He's probably has less requirements on him, is not punished as much, etc. And that is common in cult-like groups or cult systems where certain members are treated differently because of what they bring to the group, and they don't experience a lot of the abuses and harms. I still think that it sucks that they're part of it, and I do think that they are victims and they are kind of bamboozled and coerced and are under undue influence like everyone else, but they also they don't experience a lot of the negative things, but they also believe any of the negative things that anyone tells them, whether that's from people who have left or whatever. And again, we're back to speculations because no one has said this. I don't know if Kylie and Aubrey have information on this, or Concrete maybe has information on this, because I believe Concrete was on So You Think You Can Dance as well. But my guess would be Vic gets a lot of privileges. He is the industry connection, and that's why people thought that Twitch was involved for a while. I'm guessing they are just really close. So since the documentary has come out and everyone's talking about this again and it's front of mind, Miranda Derrick did make a statement on her Instagram and TikTok stories, and I made a TikTok about it, so let's watch that together really quick. On her Instagram story and TikTok stories in response to the Dancing for the Devil Netflix cult documentary, which largely featured her family talking about her joining Shekinah Church and 7M Films management company.
Guys, I hope you're having a wonderful day. I just wanted to hop on here really quick and first of all say thank you so much to everybody who's been so supportive during this time. In the next couple slides, I've included my statement of this documentary that's just been released. I can't go into too much detail because of legal purposes, but I just wanted to add my side of the story a little bit. Thank you so much for taking a read. Have a great day.
This is the first slide. You can pause to read. And the second slide, the very top might be cut off a little bit, but you get the gist. The thing about being in a cult is you never think that you're in a cult. In fact, a lot of cults spend a lot of time telling members what their version of a cult is and why they are not, in fact, a cult. As I was reading the statement, it looked and sounded very similar to the statements that Miranda and B-Dash released back in 2022 when coverage of this first was really viral on social media, and they were addressing the fact that they do not believe they're in a cult and they're fine. It just had a very similar tone and very similar writing style. I think it's interesting that Miranda just was trying to heavily emphasize that her and her family have issues outside of this, and this is just about her being religious when her family is not, which is a really common cult tactic with religious-based cults. Christian persecution complex is a very real thing, and a lot of Christianity-based cults use that to convince cult members that they are doing the right thing and that the outside world is dangerous or demonic or worldly. They persecute you because they are just so bad and you are just so good. And that's kind of what this statement felt like to me. Unfortunately for Miranda, this statement doesn't even scratch the surface of all of the allegations against 7M Films and Shekinah Church and Robert Shinn. This whole documentary wasn't just about Miranda, and the discourse around the cult isn't just about Miranda and her family. There are so many other people involved and people who have come out who were in the documentary that described a very cult-like environment that had nothing to do with Miranda just being religious or her family just not understanding what she wants. Whether her and her family have a bad relationship or not, she's still in a cult. But I can also pretty much guarantee that commenting that on her videos or DMing her that or
replying to her statements saying that she's in a cult will also have no bearing on her awareness of that. It will not help her get out. If her own family cannot help her get out of this situation, certainly strangers on the internet are not going to. So please be kind to Miranda and all of the dancers that are still in this high control environment. I do think Miranda looks a lot more comfortable addressing this topic in that video that she posted before her statements than she has in past videos that she has posted to social media trying to deny all of the allegations or confront her family. She's definitely getting a lot more comfortable with the camera and with the uncomfortable situation. But yeah, this is very typical behavior and a typical statement for someone in a cult or high control group. I know I have been in this position.
So I know you probably couldn't pause to read those. You can find that on my TikTok, or I don't know if it's on Miranda's page still. It's probably on Without a Crystal Ball's Instagram. But in that statement, Miranda said that that Melanie didn't like her praying out loud, and that her family didn't like that she had become closer to God and closer to Jesus. And she said that when her papa was sick in the hospital and they said their last goodbyes, she had tried to pray for him in the car, and Melanie wouldn't let her do it. And then she said her papa passed shortly after that. And it sounded to me like she was blaming her papa passing so soon on Melanie not allowing her to pray and intercede for him in prayer. And I thought that was wild. And I wonder if Miranda didn't write that statement at all. Her family has come forward basically saying they don't think she wrote that statement at all. It doesn't sound like her. And people on the internet are wondering if she recorded that like intro well before the docuseries came out, and then she didn't even know what the statement was going to say and then released it. It feels like Robert Shinn is throwing Miranda under the bus again, and she is taking the fall for a lot of this. On some Exposing 7M Instagram accounts, you can look that up on Instagram. They said that the dancers that have left described Miranda being kind of punished and called out during church services for her family speaking out. So she is likely going through all of that again, which is so sad. I hope that she's okay. I hope that they're not treating her too horribly. But if they are, I hope that her shelf that she keeps putting these red flags on breaks eventually. And she knows that she can always go back to her family and that people will receive her really well if she decides to leave. Well, that's all I have for this video, guys. I will be sure to share updates, probably more so on my TikTok as we learn more about the situation, if anybody else comes out, if there's a part 2, etc. But thank you for sticking around with me for this. I hope you found it informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit that like button and make sure you subscribe to see all of my other videos that come out if you're interested in all things culty and high control groups and celebrities, trending topics, pop culture, etc. And I will see you in the next video on No Culty Vibes. Bye.